Here's a message from today's episode sponsor.
Insulet, makers of Omnipod, are committed to simplifying the lives of people with insulin-dependent diabetes. Omnipod 5 automated insulin delivery system aid is indicated for people with type 1 diabetes ages 2 years and older. Omnipod 5 is the first and only tubeless aid system in the United States that is exclusively available in the pharmacy. The Omnipod 5 combines a tubeless, waterproof, wearable pod that integrates with Dexcom G6 CGM to automatically adjust insulin based on glucose trends every 5 minutes. For more information on this innovative technology, visit omnipod.com. Disclaimers: the pod has an IP28 rating for up to 25 feet for 60 minutes. The Omnipod 5 controller is not waterproof. The Dexcom G6 is sold separately and requires a separate prescription. Visit omnipod.com/safety for additional important safety information.
You're listening to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
All right. Hey, welcome to This Week in Pharmacy. My name is Todd Uri. I am your host, founder of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. And this is This Week in Pharmacy. I'm so excited to be back. This has been a fast week, super busy week. We are getting ready for the Asembia Specialty Pharmacy Business Event of the Year. I don't know if you've ever heard of Access, but it's AXS 23. It happens in Las Vegas every year. This organization puts together one of the most phenomenal business events for all things specialty pharmacy. Pharmacy Podcast Network will be there as press and media support. So if you're at Asembia, please reach out to me so that we can meet up and I can hear from you and how you're innovating specialty pharmacy as a pharmacist or pharmacy professional. Thank you so much for joining TWIRx. This is a show for all things what's happening in pharmacy. Obviously, we can't cover everything or it would be a 12-hour show like Joe Rogan, but we try to keep this to an hour. So I have a packed episode today with 4 amazing guests doing nothing but innovating the world of pharmacy care. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor today, which is Dexcom. Dexcom is a leading continuous glucose monitoring system that tracks your glucose levels and throughout the day and night, giving readings and smart device system data so that your pharmacist and physician can work together to assure that your pharmacy and pharmacist and diabetes care is at maximum delivery of what technology is doing for us. I think it's phenomenal how far it's come. I entered pharmacy 2004. It is a completely different world today of what we can do with tech and inserting our pharmacists. We have a packed episode today. We're going to be talking with Leaky, who is a returning guest on Pharmacy Podcast from 4 years ago. We're going to be talking with Vince King, Cyrillik Dvorsky. They're both from TailorMed. And then we're going to round out the show today with Eric Speck. Dr. Speck is with RPH Ally, Pharmacist Support Director. Go RPH Ally. If you're not part of the RPH Ally network, if you're listening to the podcast and you're not watching us live, streaming on YouTube and Twitter, and I think LinkedIn, although we might have broken that link this week, definitely look up rphally.com. But I'm going to get into the show. I want to start out with some news, and I want to talk about the FDA. And the FDA had a warning, and they said there was some risk of overheating devices of the Freestyle Libre glucose monitors. And this could cause some big problems for patients who have integrated this technology into their lives in diabetes management. There have been, they said, 7 fires, which created some injury for patients, and they're concerned. This is a concern for us as healthcare providers and us as a communications and publication company that focuses on pharmacists and pharmacy care. So I want to hear from pharmacists who are diabetes educators and who focus on diabetes as a part of your practice. Please let us know if you heard from any of your patients who were using the Freestyle and how you're overcoming this. We're going to be talking to Like about this in just a second. But before, I wanted to get to the next news item, which is telemedicine provides paradigm shift in specialty pharmacist role on care teams. This came out from Pharmacy Times just this week, and it's a really interesting article about the use of telemedicine at the next level and how specialty pharmacists who are constantly in touch with patients ongoing for special analysis for their condition and the medications that they're on. I want to hear from specialty pharmacists. This is why we're excited about Assembia 2023. We want to talk about telemedicine at the event on purpose so we can understand how's it's changed. Because as we all know and remember from the pandemic, we feel like we got shoved into, if you weren't already using telemedicine, you definitely understand its capacity now to help people. And I think people out there that were consulting in person that weren't able to get out for a myriad of reasons realize the power of telemedicine. This is going to continue. So if you are a community pharmacist, if you're a specialty pharmacist, long-term care consultant, we also want to talk more about, and we'll be doing a segment on a future TWIRx about telemedicine specifically and the role of our pharmacists and how this kind of ties into the expansion of services. The last article before we get to our guests that I really want to jump into, I want to bring to your attention. There's an article out of Drug Topics that said what pharmacists need to know about point of care testing for STIs and sexually transmitted infections. We're going to be coming back to this subject with Dr. Nadia Archambault. She's known as the Sex PharmD. I'm going to do an entire episode on STIs and testing. We also have POC Talk, which is a point of care testing podcast brought to you by Dr. Kristen Talent. And I think I'd like a cross episode between those two, talking about the importance of point of care testing and STIs and how pharmacists can really become the go-to source for ongoing education about leveraging point of care testing, but then also follow up for treatments. And what that means for your practice and your community. I think of community independent pharmacists, and I think, wow, this is a business opportunity to give more consultative services and education to your communities. And I wonder if you've ever thought of a community day or a sex education day or even an education around sexually transmitted disease and how that could increase you as a healthcare resource and as the community advocate for public health. And so once again, anything that we talk about on TWIRx, it's almost like we set the stage for something bigger. Either that becomes a series of content that we like to develop with you, or we reach out to companies who are becoming subject matter experts in the realm of whatever that topic is. And I think point of care testing over the next year is going to become a huge part of community pharmacies out there that want to leverage and become disease state experts. I want to bring in our first guest who was on Pharmacy Podcast Network 4 years ago, and it's gone by fast, Dr. Like Abuja. And he is known as the Pharmacist podcast host. Like, it's so good to have you back and see you. And you look, like I said, you're handsome.
Professorial.
You look like a Jedi Master.
Thanks for having me back, Todd. And I'm so happy to be back with the family once again. Time went by so fast, and really can't believe it's been 4 years. I really can't.
Before we started into the show, you were in the green room and we were talking about what we were talking about. And we were we were on a new news item that just had come out in the Wall Street Journal, and I think Forbes talked about it, which was delivery of medication and delivery of health services through Uber. And jettison 4 years ahead, and that's not even news anymore.
I know, right? Because it was like we predicted what was going to happen. and I kind of felt because of the infrastructural backbone that Uber built, I kind of felt that if Uber Eats was a thing, which it was at that time, then Uber Health was going to be next. And boy, it did come to pass. Someone needs to get paid.
I know. Like I said, we should have developed some kind of stock program dedicated to pharmacists that want to get into delivery of more services to their community coming out of the pandemic. It's so interesting. I want to shift back to the article. FDA warns risk of overheating fire with the Freestyle Libre. So as a pharmacist who has concentrated in diabetes and treatment, let's talk about this. What do you think as a pharmacist you can do when you see an article like this to come out to also notify some of your people and patients that you know are using this technology? But how does a pharmacist, how does a community pharmacist or a consultant pharmacist best navigate something like this?
Great. Thanks. Before I proceed with my comments and submissions, I would just like to make a disclaimer, just like I did last time. I still have some associations and affiliations with Walgreens as a health outcomes pharmacist, where I just support strategies towards improving health outcomes for diabetes and other medical conditions. And as a dispensing pharmacist for CVS Pharmacy. But primarily today, I'm actually talking as a co-host of a Kaizen Pharmacist and founder and principal consultant of Linguistics Consulting Group. Back to your question, Todd. I mean, it's amazing because one of the things that we actually started hearing from, I would say wearers, because you have to wear the pattern there for the users of the CGMs, it's that it wasn't really sticking a lot, but I think they've actually perfected that. But going to the flesh of the article, I did speak to some of the representatives from Freestyle. I do not speak for them. I did order a free meter from them like about 2-3 years ago where I tested it and, everything was okay. But they did tell me the problem these people had was because, one, they're elderly, which means they did not have access to smartphones. That's why they were using transmitters. And just like you see on a daily basis, people come in, their readings are whack. So we have to actually transition them back to capillary testing with finger sticks, just to kind of make sure they are actually in line at goal of their blood sugar readings. But as more and more people are actually joining this cohort of patients using the CGMs, it's just only going to get better. And I believe we are in the right path.
What I'm wondering is if you're focused on diabetes care and now your patient comes to you, they've gotten used to using this technology to do the monitoring, to take their levels, anything that pops up that would be considered dangerous, they're probably reaching out to their pharmacist or physician, or someone on their care, a care team provider. But what do you do when we're getting our patients used to using wearables, technology, making sure that your phone's tied into this, your smartphone. So I really am interested in having a plan that if something does go wrong, that we can quickly shift as a healthcare provider, aka our community independent pharmacies, quickly react to something like this notification on the Freestyle. So what have you seen or what have you heard when it comes to implementing technology in diabetes treatment?
Great. And in fairness to the manufacturers, which is Freestyle and Dexcom, who were two main ones I've kind of worked with, whenever we have a patient with situations like that, they would actually send in a free capillary testing device for the patient next day, and they're quick at replacing whatever device is defective. Because at the end of the day, it's extremely important that the patients actually monitor their blood sugar, and that's why you have that device. And in a way to actually encourage them to keep using it, I actually recommend using your smartphone if you do have one. Right now, as we know that smartphones are ubiquitous. Almost everyone has them, but not everyone knows how to use them. So we continue to educate our patients. But like I said, the primary focus for me at my practice when a patient presents a situation like that is to make sure, one, we determine the blood sugar level at that point in time, and then we can figure out how to get a replacement device from Freestyle and Dexcom. But right now, I think the issue that FDA actually announced was with the Freestyle Libre 14-day and Freestyle Libre 2. There's a Freestyle Libre 3, which does not really have, where they have not actually reported the issues with Freestyle Libre 3. But in appreciation of Freestyle, they've been able to replace these devices with patients. And I think the problem came from people using other USB chargers. Just like we have with our cell phones, that happens sometimes where you find a generic charger, which is USB, put your phone in it and heats up without actually delivering a charge. And I think that's what, so now their recommendation is to use the yellow USB port and charger that actually came with the device, not to outsource it. And if anything happens, they're free to, they will replace it. But like I said, the primary thing with patients at the point of care is to make sure we stabilize them and then get them back into believing in wearables. I mean, it's with our elderly patients over 65 years of age, it's still a struggle to get them to embrace technology as it is.
I appreciate your insights, because I think of how quick you could react if you had something on the shelf, whether it's an upgraded model, like you're saying, Model 3, or if you had a Dexcom standing by that you could get implemented quickly so that you don't have people that don't have those metrics that they've gotten used to it. I know I'm a creature of habit as well. I do things very similar. It takes a long time for me to change a habit. As an example, this stupid camera that I'm looking at right now is a new camera because our other camera broke like 3 days ago, and we knew TWIRx was coming. So now I don't have the cool change ability like we had before, which it was fun.
But we do support patients in real time, though. Like I said, most times when things like that happen, we call Freestyle Dexcom. They do actually authorize a replacement immediately and then ship the quote-unquote replacements to the pharmacy. So, but at the same time, most times when the patient presents with that issue, we don't know the last time they had the readings. So we actually resort back to capillary testing at point of care to make sure they're okay. Then we'll actually present them with a free replacement, which will be sent back to us by Freestyle or Dexcom next day.
So in your work, what is the biggest challenge getting people to implement these technologies in the beginning? Is it the fear of usage of technology? Is it getting used to it? Are you trying to introduce the app from the phone? Like, what have you experienced in getting people to understand the importance of measurement?
I think it's a combination of factors. One is the fear, and the second one is the fear of failure. When you have people on insulin pumps, it becomes extremely critical to make sure they get accurate blood readings, So, but for most of my patients who are elderly, over 65, I guess fear of technology is still one of the factors that we have. Even with text messaging, they will tell you, do not text me because I cannot respond to it. But most of the text messages that we actually send to them is just informational, not necessarily requiring a response. So that's kind of hard in itself. We have to explain to them. So, I mean, just like my kids have TikTok and all that, I don't have TikTok. And I remember when I said it to my son, he said, what do you know about TikTok? I'm like, okay, because I'm your dad, don't mean I do. But then it's just like that, because I'm beginning to embrace Instagram and TikTok because we can actually use it for pharmacy.
Exactly.
But prior to now, I never felt there was a need to do that. And that's the same way our senior citizens feel that I've existed so long with phone calls. I don't want text messaging service. I don't want anything else. So we're trying to break down that barrier. And that's where the children and the grandchildren actually come in to help them understand and stabilize these patients and make them understand that technology is there to actually help and support what you already do.
I really appreciate what you're saying, because it's almost like we are customizing treatment to the generation. How are we delivering baby boomer, Generation X, Generation Z? How are you delivering education and insight and patient engagement through the generational difference? I think that's interesting. That sounds like a future TWIRx episode, Leaky.
Definitely, so I'll be back for that.
You can't come back in 4 years. You got to come back sooner than
sooner than 4 years. Sooner than 4 years. Pandemic kind of messed us up, but
yes,
we're back in full force.
Well, I am excited that I got to see you. I appreciate you. You're a champion for patients. We need more Dr. Leakes out there. So I wish you the best. And like I said, let's get together sooner than 4 years from now.
Definitely. Todd, thanks for having me back. I really do appreciate the opportunity to be part of the family. Thanks very much.
Take care. All right. So think about that. Generational care and what generation you're a part of has a big impact on how fast a patient accepts care and how fast they get used to using technology in part of that care, and what's happening with our finances and the support units and how people are paying for their care. And that's generational as well. There are predictions about the changing of payment methods for healthcare, and some of it's pretty scary. The way that insurance is actually changing and how expensive it's become. It has to change. It can't continue to roll up. And I think that that's an interesting transfer and transition to our next guest, because there's a company out there that is focused on delivering more payment abilities and options. I want to read a quote before we bring on our guests. When that patient chooses rent over medication, that has a downstream impact on your physician, who now cannot get the patient on treatment. That patient doesn't adhere to treatment. I think that's powerful. They're missing cycles of medication, so I'm not driving the value-based outcome that I want to drive. The patient's having a poor experience clinically and financially, and that is failure of our healthcare ecosystem. So I want to bring on Vince King and Shrilik Dvorsky, CEO and co-founder of TailorMed. Gentlemen, I am so excited to have you here on This Week in Pharmacy.
We are too. It's a pleasure being here. Thanks for having us.
Great to be here, Todd. Thank you.
So let's start out with Vince. Just give us a little background. That was your quote, by the way, that I read. And I really appreciated that. It was January just of 2023. You really thought this. I mean, that was an intimate statement that you made, because it didn't sound over marketed. It almost sounded like you were just talking from your heart. So tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely, Todd, and thank you. And, it isn't a marketing ploy, right? And I think at my core, I believe that affordability, we always talk about it in the context of the patient and how it impacts the patient, which is important. But there are many downstream impacts that affect outcomes around the entirety of the care team and then the individuals trying to run the clinic, the care site. So I have spent, my career in healthcare. I've been in healthcare about 25 years, really on the revenue side of healthcare, understanding how we afford and pay for care and supporting providers and pharmacies and payers in that activity. Over the last 5-6 years, been directly involved in the patient experience. And so how do we engage the patient? And my core belief, as Thrulik has heard me say ad nauseum, if we can get further left in the process and engage the patient directly in many of these things we're asking, all the downstream tasks become easier to execute against. Right? Clinicians will be better, pharmacists will be better, outcomes will be better if we can just get left and help the patient.
Shrilik, was this specific to oncology to start out, and now you're going into other disease conditions? Kind of talk to us about yourself in the founding of TailorMed.
Yeah, I would say to start with, it was back in the day. So I co-founded TailorMed about 5 years ago with Adam, our CTO, and my co-founder. And we weren't where we saw the biggest, most pressing problem, but one that had some adoption and understanding behind the financial challenges that patients are experiencing. And that was oncology. High cost, high prevalence condition, cancer centers in the community and in hospitals. We're trying to put together programs to address patients' financial needs. One, to have financial toxicity alleviated for those patients, but two, to be able to provide the care, but also be financially reimbursed. And this is where we started. I have to say I was not expecting that 5 years afterwards will be as broad as we are. And it's good and bad. It's good because, our business is growing. It's bad because the problem for patients far exceeds oncology. I think I heard you speak about diabetic patients just a few minutes ago with Dr. Leakey. Insulin is still unaffordable for some patients, and talk about other chronic conditions and definitely specialty care areas like oncology require a solution. And I think that we found ourselves really serving many more areas of healthcare as a result of that profound problem of affordability, which is related to oncology, but unfortunately not only.
Vince, I want to ask you, if I'm a pharmacy owner, I'm listening to today's episode, and I wonder, hey, how do I, as a pharmacist, as a pharmacy owner, how do I work with TailorMed? Tell me how that works.
So great question, Todd. And, so the good and the bad that's come out of the pandemic is that the pharmacist is even more critically participating in our treatment and our care than he or she ever has historically, right? They've always been there. I don't know that they've gotten the recognition that they deserve for being a part of treatment plans and part of the care team. The bad news is nothing left their to-do list when all this started happening to them during the pandemic, right? So when we think about partnering with pharmacists and how we can help them solve this problem, right, we think about data and can we take a look at patient populations to prioritize the right patients to get engaged with, to find the right assistance under the right circumstances, and then automating those tasks so that we can take as much out of the keystroke workflow as we can for them. Because oftentimes the provider is relying on them to solve this gap in affordability for their patient. And so when they look to partner with folks like us or others in the space, we want to look at, can we offload some of that keystroke work? Can we get some of that to-do off of their to-do list? And can we help them prioritize the right patients at the right time for the right foundations or dollars or grants or whatever the appropriate assistance is?
And if I can just add to that, Todd, I think that, when you think about pharmacy, it's a broad term as well. And we think that, the different use cases, whether it's a home infusion pharmacy or a specialty pharmacy or a retail pharmacy, require different types of intervention from, the pharmacies, whether it's, the owner setting the policy or the pharmacy tech meeting patients on a daily basis. And I think that, partnering with TailorMed starts with identifying what is that patient approach you want to take. What is your goals in terms of reducing prescription abandonment as a result of financial barriers to care? And then how would you like to provide that service to your patients? Technology enables that. But then are you experiencing, cases where you don't have enough staff and you would like to have the patients participate on their own? Or do you want to have a back office centralized team to do that? And we work with those types of organizations to first kind of understand that, these are the challenges that you have. These are some of the goals that you are setting in an organization. And then let's solution together to figure out how do we increase the availability of, or the utilization of available funding that TailorMed provides you with. So for them, we are that funnel of $58 billion worth of financial assistance that is out there. It's not TailorMed, but we are helping those patients proactively enroll to those opportunities so they can zero balance their out-of-pocket, best case scenario, or if not, meaningfully alleviate that.
So when Madeline reached out to me, part of your communications team, and kind of talked to me about TailorMed, I immediately did my Google searching and found some information. The very first thing I thought about was the world of hub services within specialty pharmacy, where pharmacists have become experts in prior authorization and making sure that the prescription gets paid, as well as following up with the treatment from a financial perspective, and then splitting their duties between a financial-driven pharmacist versus a clinical-driven pharmacist, and really how important both of those sides are to keep people adherent. I almost feel like TailorMed is that all in one. Do you think that's a good comparison to kind of consider you like a hub services?
I think that I definitely relate to your all-in-one kind of statement, but I would just explain why. Pharmacists, and just in general, everyone who is trying to access different types of financial resources to get the care they need, find themselves trying to Google search, like you did, and find dozens, if not hundreds, of different programs and portals to try and find their options. We currently have more than 6,000 different programs in our database. The one-stop shop that we provide them with is that, funneling of those options to the right patient at the right time with the right eligibility criteria. So they don't need to go into each and every one of those portals. And hub services are essentials to this process. They provide the necessary help for the manufacturers to administer their programs, but there are many of those. But as a pharmacist or as a patient, to be honest, how do I know to reach the different portals? I need something that consolidates everything for me, and then helps me manage that program lifecycle throughout my continuum of care. And that's what we provide them with.
And Todd, I do think you make an interesting call out in the hub, though, because again, to the quote you quoted earlier, right, that it's impossible to separate the clinical and the financial journey of our patient any longer, right? So the data that we receive on the front end for us is often clinical in nature, right? That we see diagnosis and scripts and treatment plans and those kinds of things. We also often see financial, right? And that's how we begin to make our decisions. So we are in a place to be able to facilitate that journey for the hub themselves, for the pharmacists themselves, and ultimately for the patient.
So talk to me, and I'm not sure either of you can definitely take this, but I'm very curious. So I've worked in pharmacy software systems for years. That's actually how I entered pharmacy. So there's 25 systems out there. The dominant one in community pharmacy, like PioneerRx or Liberty or something like that. So how does TailorMed interface with these systems to deliver all of that data so that the pharmacy that is the preferential pharmacy of the patient is able to move forward in their treatment?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. Just a bit of my engineering background to explain how we are working with those types of vendors or IT systems. At the end of the day, what we need in order to empower the pharmacies to leverage the full capacity of what we can offer them is data from the IT systems that you mentioned, whether it's an EHR on the provider side or a pharmacy management system on the pharmacy side. Or multiples, we have the capabilities of getting those data feeds into TailorMed, which power our ability to be proactive and predict which patients will need the assistance the most. So we can do that in many different ways, whether it's a low lift on the pharmacy IT or a fully integrated solution. We have all of those capabilities, but at the end of the day, it goes back to what the pharmacy wants to try and achieve from a use case perspective. We don't want to just connect tech for the sake of tech. We want to make sure it's something that supports the use case they need without burdening them with developing like crazy APIs that everybody likes to speak about. We can, but we need to make sure that it supports the right model. And we do work with those types of vendors that you mentioned. We get data about patient demographics that they usually store. We get the script data that we need in order to find eligible programs that have financial assistance. And we can complement that data with our own, data sources, whether it's the programs data for financial assistance or benefits data with our own benefits investigation engines that we have.
Vince, and starting with oncology, you've now built out an entire portfolio of services out of what TailorMed's delivering. Expand for our listeners what else TailorMed is doing.
So it's a great question, right? And so oncology was a natural starting point for us, and in many cases, it was the bellwether on financial impacts to outcomes, right? Everybody understood it's not only the devastation a cancer diagnosis can have clinically, but also financially. So it was a logical place to start, and that's where the hands were on keyboards trying to solve this problem. As we stepped back and we looked at the opportunity, that's a small subset of the patients that we could assist, given the opportunity to broadly look at them, right? So when we think about solving the problem, we start at a high level and we'll take a look at all the patient data across the pharmacy, across the health system, across the practitioner to look at your prescribing and dispensing behavior, right? Once we look at that data, then we can look across disease states, regardless of diagnosis. We can be everywhere a prescription is written and or dispensed, and it gives us the best way to see all of the opportunity for assistance that's available within a particular care setting, right? So that's not to say that all of it is appropriate assistance, right? So we just start at the universe and we work down to the appropriate because we can see the totality of the patient population. And then that allows us to risk stratify those patients, right? So we can take a look at patients based on the benefits and the out-of-pocket estimation that TWIRx just mentioned. And then we can risk stratify them, right? So we can take a look at, and this is an oversimplified example, right? But if I have commercial insurance and a branded medication, there's a good likelihood that I'll get approved for a copay card. That copay card is available today. It'll be available next Tuesday, right? TWIRx may be in a different financial situation. He may need foundation assistance. Those funds open, close, fund, defund with irregularity. So we want to prioritize the enrollment of TWIRx into that foundation today, right? Regardless of his diagnoses, regardless of his medication, we want to find that opportunity to help him today so that we can capture those dollars, right? So that drives all of the clinical outcomes, and it drives financial performance for the health systems or the pharmacy, because we can capture those dollars in real time, that if you postpone TWIRx till next Tuesday, those dollars may be gone, right? So when we look at how we can help folks in this very broad and yet unique problem here in the States, is that we can provide that broad visibility to the entirety of your patient population, understand how to rank order, risk stratify them, so we're engaging with the right patient at the right time and finding the right assistance, regardless of disease state, diagnosis, drug type. That's where we can dig in and where we can leverage the tools that we're mentioning.
Yeah, and actually, Todd, I have to say that you mentioned oncology, which is like a natural go-to disease state. It's part of the problem. And I'm going to give a talk in Zambia in a few weeks about some of the stories we see from the trenches, meaning our network, and how, so many efforts are being put by pharmacies and provider organizations to try and move the needle for patients, but not all of them are successful. And part of that is because when you think about financial assistance, when you think about financial toxicity, you think about oncology. But unfortunately, financial toxicity is not only an oncology problem. Think about someone who has anticoagulation drugs or a cardiovascular drugs, or even an inhaler. Their out of pocket for every refill can be hundreds of dollars. And the prescription abandon rate for that would be above 25%. When pharmacies think about financial assistance, they need to think about their entire patient population. And they need to build programs, which is harder, I get it, but they need to build programs where they serve all patients in all disease states.
Who's the customer? I know that it's the patient ultimately, but who's paying TailorMed in order to deliver these services?
So the only customer is not the patient. The patient is the beneficiary of that service. Pharmacies look at financial assistance as a way to serve their patients better, but also to reduce prescription abandonment. Providers, whether it's health systems or specialty practices, want to do that for the benefit of their patients, but also because they are seeing write-offs and uncompensated care. And those are the reasons that we are partnering with those organizations that not only use TailorMed to address medication affordability and provide better patient care, but also they are made financially whole. And we are really helping them see financial performance improvements in a very meaningful way. They are our customers.
Are you communicating this to pharmacists and pharmacies directly? And I understand you're going to Assembia, which is amazing. We're going to be there as well. And I think you belong in specialty initially, but give me an idea of how you're teaching pharmacists, pharmacies about TailorMed. Is it the community pharmacist? Is it specialty initially? Obviously, that's probably the sweet spot to start, but talk to us about, how you're getting this messaging out.
So initially, specialty makes sense, and we have a very big footprint in specialty pharmacies. Some of the largest specialty pharmacies are already using us in order to help their patients. Retail, home infusion, infusion pharmacies are all part of the network, and educating them starts with, first of all, understanding, as Vince said before, their universe of prescriptions, where they currently deploy technology or teams or do not, in order to find financial assistance opportunity for their patients. And then learning together what is the right structure of a program for them. Because what will be a good program for specialty pharmacies that have patient financial services teams will not necessarily be the right fit for a retail pharmacy, where the patients will be the one that have to self-serve. And then helping them with a patient experience solution that we can offer will be more appropriate. So I think it starts with data. It starts with what is your prescription data, how many of your patients are currently struggling to fill their scripts, and then starting from there. But Vince, any thoughts there?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, I think we talked about it earlier, right? Solving affordability with medication assistance it's not a new tool to address this opportunity, right? It's been around for a while. And the good and the bad news is we've all tried really hard, but we've all tried in our silos, right? So providers have tried to do it themselves. Pharmacists have tried to do it themselves. Infusion, pharmacy, pharma has helped as well, right? And so I think the number one thing we're doing is creating a network of constituents that are trying to solve this together, because we have a fundamental belief that we cannot do it ourselves, right? And I think it's proven in the data, right? So many of the ways that we're educating is, for example, our network constituents are making introductions to others, like across lines. So pharma introducing us to pharmacy or vice versa to say, hey, there's an opportunity for us to collaborate here and work better. We can serve more patients. We all win in this scenario, right? No one gets hurt if we help the patients get on therapy more quickly and help them adhere to therapy, right? That is one of the most fun things to talk about here is anybody in the value chain wins, right? There's no one that has disproportionate share or other, potentially negative outcomes. So the number one way is talk to our network constituents, and that they get it like almost immediately, right? When we start talking about it in this context, there's an aha moment for them. And then it's, standard go-to-market, right? Where we are talking about creating education, creating material, being very transparent in the data we use and how we get to the places where we understand how we can help, and being very transparent in how we do what we do. And there's just a natural conversation that comes from there.
If you're listening, you want to learn more, go to tailormed.co. Once again, that's Tailor, TAILOR, med, tailormed.co. So when is your presentation? I'll be showing up in Vegas around May 1st. I'll be there till May 4th. When is your presentation, Shrilly?
Yeah, so let me pull up the exact date. You're coming off guard here for a second. That's going to be May 3rd, Wednesday, at 1:45 p.m. And it's not going to be about us. It's just going to be about pharmacies who are part of our network, and some of the fundamental issues that we're seeing that are not allowing them to reach as many patients and the funding that is available for those patients that they can, and some of the learnings that we've had. So it will be great to see you guys there.
We'll be there. I'd like to get a quote from one of you as well. We're gonna a shout out to the team at Assembia. They're wonderful to work with. I think they're putting us at a special media location by the pool. And guess what's by the pool? The bar. So you put the bar, the pool, and podcasting. That's my jam. I'll stay there the entire time.
John, I think there's your quote right there.
Pool, bar, podcast. Join us at
There you go.
2023 in Las Vegas. There you go. That's the commercial. I have to have Brady mix that up. And Brady, does that sound like a good commercial? Yes or no?
Sounds fantastic.
Full bar podcast. Let's go. No, it's going to be fun. When I go there, it's a fire hose of information. If you've never been to Asembia and you want to get deeper into specialty care, as well as technology, there's a tremendous amount of technology companies that show up there. This is the place to go. So excited about the upcoming event. Excited that TailorMed was introduced. A shout out to your PR and communication team for bringing this to our attention. I'd like to actually unpack this and start digging down into specific disease states and how you're helping pharmacies to manage that and start bringing in some of your expertise. So we're going to have you back. But gentlemen, I really appreciate this time and you spending time with us in This Week in Pharmacy.
It's been a pleasure, and would be happy to come back and share some more stories from the trenches about how we can help pharmacies help their patients.
Absolutely.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity, Todd. Keep doing the good work, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You guys have a great weekend. We'll see you in Vegas.
All right. Be well. Thank you.
All right. Hey, if you're listening right now and you have solutions that are tied into payment and helping to ease payment issues, please give us a shout out. Give us a tweet. Go to Instagram. Go to LinkedIn. We're all over the place. You can find us if you go to pharmacypodcast.com, obviously. But we care about you. We care about the care that you deliver as a pharmacist. And we want to hear, this is how we learn about things, to talk about and to expand and to network. And really, it's about the network more than anything. That is a key word in our next guest, is the word network, and the strength of a network, the strength to come together as a profession and be trusting of each other in the fact that we don't have to always agree on everything, but we do have to work together to make sure that the patient gets the services that they need. And there are so many pharmacists that are passionate about pharmacy care. RPH Ally has been an amazing partner of the Pharmacy Podcast Network and bringing more pharmacists. We're starting to see multiple pharmacists have shows with Dr. Walker, and then come over to Pharmacy Podcast and deliver more content. Before our guests, though, I want to give a shout out to Dr. Jake Nichols. He's the author of Unfit for Recovery. I'm about just beginning this book. If you want to understand opioid use disorder and treatment and what someone went through, Jake is passionate. He's sincere. He's intimate with his readers. He gets into some of the weeds of what he experienced. Once again, Unfit for Recovery. If you can't see this book and you're listening to the podcast, look it up. Just Google Unfit for Recovery by Dr. Jake Nichols. It's a eye-opening book because it gives you the perception of what it's like to go through recovery in treatment, and how Jake felt that he wasn't even worthy of treatment, and he's a provider. So it was another layer of treatment, and this is special to us because opioid use disorder was part of my career growth in healthcare as a communicator. As I worked in that space, specifically marrying emergency room treatment, being some, patients being Narcan, people being Narcan, and then putting them into treatment immediately and being able to make that as seamless as possible. The disruption of that to a person's life. We have to have passionate providers, and we do have a passionate provider coming on next. I'm excited to welcome Dr. Eric Speck, PharmD, and he has a business background as well as an MBA, and he is the pharmacist support director of RPH Ally. And Eric, welcome to This Week in Pharmacy. Oh, I can't hear you. Your audio is turned off.
All right, that's better. Apologize for that. No, I said I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on. Do want to add about that book that you were just talking about, Unfit for Recovery by Jake Nichols. I have that book. It's sitting right over there. Unfortunately, I have to admit I have not opened it yet, but I am looking forward to diving into it. I've known Jake for, probably a year or two now. He's an awesome guy. He's one of the reasons that I became more public about my experience and my story. From hearing people like him, sharing their story kind of gave me the courage to share mine. So, thanks to people like Jake, it's one of the reasons that I'm here today, talking with you.
That's special. So give us some background on yourself. I want to know why you wanted to become a pharmacist. I'm so curious. I've never asked this question and received the same answer. It's different every time. I've talked to thousands of pharmacists over the years. So what's your story?
Sure. Well, I'm a third generation pharmacist. I'm actually the fifth to graduate pharmacy school in my family. So a lot of times I joke around and I say I became a pharmacist because I was brainwashed growing up. And the truth is my family, my father, my uncle, my grandfather, they owned a few pharmacies when I was growing up, and they really enjoyed it. They enjoyed being pharmacists. They enjoyed helping their patients and, providing, I guess, a service to the community in a great way. So I saw how much they loved it. And so when it got time for me to kind of choose my career path, I looked at a lot of different things, but ultimately settled on pharmacy because it was something that I knew I would enjoy as well. Doing for a while and helping people.
So your experience with what you went through in your personal life and how it probably disrupted your life a bit. Share with our listeners about that. I think that's very interesting, just like Jake, because you see it from a different perspective because you are a healthcare provider as well.
Yeah, one thing interesting, and it's true for me, and I hear it a lot about other healthcare providers who struggle with addiction. They always think it's never going to happen to me, especially as a pharmacist. She said, I'm the drug expert. I know everything there is to know about these drugs more than anybody else. So I know how to not get addicted, or whatever story we're trying to tell ourselves that it's not going to happen to us. And so that's the story I told myself. I said, I'm a pharmacist. I'm a very responsible person. I'm a very professional person. I'm not a drug addict. It's not going to happen to me. And that was like the first mistake. So shortly after I graduated pharmacy school and started working in the profession, I did develop a opioid use disorder. And one of the reasons I fell into that trap, growing up and just things in my life, things came relatively easy. There was nothing I wasn't able to conquer or accomplish. If there was a challenge, no matter how big it was, I was always able to be successful in pursuing that. And this was the first time in my life where something really just kicked my ass. I could not defeat it no matter how hard I tried. Once those the opiates got a grasp of me, it would not let go. And it happened so quickly. Really, it was about 6 months of use before I was in the worst place of my life, and I couldn't stop using.
Was this based on an injury initially, or was it something that you just got into from a recreational perspective? But how did it kind of transpire in domino?
Yeah, good question. It was definitely not an injury, nothing physical. Sometimes I joke around saying, I know opiates are used to help manage pain. And I said I was struggling with some emotional pain, and the opiates worked really well for that.
Makes sense, though. For goodness, I have a family, some of on my mom's side especially, that went through some alcoholism and how easy that was. And I feel like throughout my life, I've teeter-tottered in that realm. And I've always been able to pull back with being double-checked by, family people in my life that are telling me, watch out, because this has been in your family. And I think there's a tie back to generational addiction too. And I think sometimes that's psychological, the way I was always around it, from the time I can remember. The smell of it, the support of they call it supporting dysfunction with dysfunction. It can snowball, and it can. But now you have something very special to offer, Eric, and that is you understand it because you went through it. So how does that impact your ideas for care for people that are going through opioid use disorder?
Yeah, you definitely are able to understand it on a different level. And that's one reason I, reached out to you initially was, the pharmacist's expanding role into treating patients with opioid use disorder by providing, buprenorphine medications, being on the front lines for that. And that's the treatment regimen that I went through as well. But I never could have imagined in a million years how bad addiction can get. I mean, the things that you go through when you're struggling with an addiction, the feelings of depression, insomnia, can't really be described. And I always tell people, think about the worst time in your life when you felt that you were at your worst and at your lowest, and how bad it felt. I say, if you're struggling with an opiate addiction, multiply that worst feeling you've ever had by 1,000. I mean, I never would have come close. I never would have thought that in this realm of life that we live as humans, it would be possible to feel that bad and to go through such terrible emotions. And it wasn't just for a short period of time. I mean, that struggle sticks with you for a long time as you're working to get clean. So yeah, having gone through it myself, I know how hard it is. And I don't think any person, pharmacist, physician, can truly understand the severity of addiction and what somebody's going through without having gone through it themselves. It is, like I said, 1,000 times, a million times worse than I ever could have imagined. So if I didn't go through it myself, I would think, these patients, they're having a difficult time right now, struggling with their opioid use disorder. And I get it, it's hard, but I would have really no idea of how hard it actually was. So, I developed a lot of empathy and compassion for people who are struggling with addiction. And, I've learned what works for me. And I just try to be that person for, those people who are out there. And on RPH Ally, I'm the director of the Pharmacy Peer Support Channel. And we provide support for a lot of personal and professional issues. One of the main reasons I wanted to join RPH Ally and do this is because I know there are a good number of pharmacists out there, or pharmacy professionals, who are struggling with, some type of substance use disorder. And to have a place to go to talk to somebody who really understands, what they're going through, and to provide a little bit of direction and guidance is really, really fulfilling for me. It's something I do pro bono, just because I care so much and I want to help people so they don't need to go through the same thing that I went through, or at least not for as long, if it's possible.
Our network has been a constant drum of content around addiction and specifically opioid use disorder. And we had a 7-part series through the University of Pittsburgh Pharmacy School, Duquesne University, and the Pennsylvania Pharmacists Association, all about stigma. And I think you and people like Dr. Nichols, Jake, present an extremely valuable perspective, because when you start talking to a fellow provider that's going through it, you immediately come across sincere and not stigma driven, where you feel I don't think that they feel judged, because they know that you've been through it too. And I think there's a special, not that you want our providers to have to go through it, obviously, and experience it, but the light at the end of the tunnel and the goodness that has come out for you and for someone like Jake is the fact that you can speak levels ahead than someone that never went through it, that's kind of having to build trust. I think there's a trust there that you give off almost immediately when you're talking to a fellow provider.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. I think it is very natural that occurs. The stigma thing is huge. When somebody, whether a patient, a family member, a friend, you hear about they have an addiction problem, or they're an alcoholic, or they're addicted to opiates, whatever it is, there's automatically a negative connotation to that. Somebody described to me a while back, they said it really should just be like, if somebody falls and breaks their arm, it's like, oh my gosh, there's, a condition here that needs to be treated. They're hurt. And then once it's fixed, they're not known as the broken arm guy anymore. But, if somebody who has addiction, it should be looked at the same way as somebody who had, a fractured arm. This person is, going through a challenge. They're struggling with this condition, this substance use disorder, and they're going to heal from it, with the right treatment and the right course. Hopefully, it's of course what we all hope for. And then that should be it. But, there's that stigma there where if somebody's been clean and sober for 5, 10 years, 20 years, haven't had an ounce of alcohol or illicit substance in their body longer than most people, but yet they've been labeled an addict and have a history of addiction, that's going to stick with them forever. And that's just not right at all. I know there's a big push to end the stigma on this kind of stuff, and we're making a lot of progress. It's going in the right direction. And, it still has a long ways to go, but we're making progress there. So that's refreshing.
A shout out to our listeners, Eric and our listeners. We have a new series called Opioid RX. It's dedicated to our profession. It's dedicated to pharmacists that are in opioid use disorder and are innovators. We've had 2 episodes so far. Eric, you are invited to become one of those episodes, if not a numerous of episodes. So I'm going to be reaching out to you, scheduling that, and I'd like to actually get Jake on. Maybe the 3 of us could actually have a conversation.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be a fantastic conversation and episode. Yeah, undoubtedly.
I want to say thank you, but with how open you've been and sincere, and I know that that's not hard in itself, but you're a champion of healthcare, and you're a hero of mine, obviously, as a pharmacist. And I just want to say thank you for being a guest today.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. It's become easier. Like I said earlier with Jake, the more people that tell their stories gives me the courage to tell my story. And in doing so, I hope it encourages others to do the same. And in doing so, it helps me heal. So it's it's a win-win for everybody with me doing this.
That's awesome. Thank you, Eric.
All right, Todd, thank you.
Soon. All right. You are pharmacists. You are pharmacy technicians. We are here for you. If there's anything that we can ever do, we want to do it for you. Please reach out to the show, tweet us, follow us, tell us what content we're missing and what we can design for you. If you're going to, once again, Assembia, please reach out to us. I'd love to meet up with you there. If you don't have a US Farmy shirt, go to usfarmy.com. Once again, that's usfarmy.com. Buy a shirt. 100% of these shirt proceeds go to veterans advocacy organization here in Fayette County, Pennsylvania, called the Dog Tag Club. And with that, that was This Week in Pharmacy for April 14th, 2023. We love you, pharmacists. You're our favorite providers, and we will speak with you soon.